Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the UX World, the Voice User Experience and Strategy podcast. Today's episode is all about conversational commerce. I was going to call it voice commerce or V-commerce. I like the term V-commerce. But actually, after listening to the episode back and speaking with our guest today, I think that conversational commerce is more appropriate because today's episode isn't just looking at voice commerce, it's looking at the whole conversational landscape. And our guest today is talking very passionately and very intently about the need for brands to be having a presence across all conversational channels, not just voice, which I think is absolutely true. And we're getting really into detail about how you can use conversational experiences to convert people into paying customers. So how can you transact in conversational environments? We touch on all kinds of things to consider, from resourcing to creation to the landscape in general. Really, this episode is going to help any brand or any individual who wants to start turning conversations into commerce. Our guest today is Charlie Cadbury. He is the co-founder of Say It Now, and Say It Now are helping brands respond to the customer need for immediacy and helping brands get on a presence on all of these conversation channels and helping them to convert people into paying customers. Ladies and gentlemen, this is VUX World. Welcome to the podcast, Charlie. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on here finally. We've been talking about this for quite some time, so it's nice to finally do it.
It's very nice to have made it. I thought I'd lost my voice in Spain this weekend, but it's back enough. If I go a little bit husky, just enjoy it.
I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll add to the already excellent sound that you've got in that soundproof room over there. I think it'll just make it a little bit more characterful, I think.
Magic.
So, tell everybody who you are and what you do at the moment. And we're going to talk about voice commerce today. So maybe it's a bit of a brief background into yourself and how you've kind of come to the whole kind of voice commerce space.
Yeah, sure. So I've had a career completely in technology. So that started as on my first website in 1999, worked through technology. I set up a software business in around 2006 with one co-founder, and then over the years grew that to a 45-man team. And during that time, we pivoted the business about 4 times because you had to find out where your market was. We started very much as a web business, working as a partner to top-tier advertising and marketing agencies. And then we became a social business when Facebook started to allow us to build Facebook applications. We built all those for Samsung for a number of years. And then when mobile actually got to the fore, we started building mobile applications, again, through these ad agencies. But then we started to go direct to client, working with banks, and we built the mobile app for Greg's the Bakers, and that's where really started to get an understanding about the changing nature of the transaction. I suppose at the time, the killer app was the Starbucks app, because in 2012 they said that was accounting for 11% of their entire revenue in the States was all coming through the app, and people could see that this was a new way to pay for things. And the way that we started to look at that was that ever since the dawn of time, the way that us humans have bought and sold things has been continually evolving. We used to trade a cow for a goat, and then invented shekels and leather money, paper money, coins, credit cards, and then mobile commerce. And so the way that we wanted to look at that was not as a new competency that you should learn, but as a transient competency that you should continue to evolve. And so that's always been at the back of my mind, that the important thing about any kind of new interface is how that's going to affect the transaction. Now, during that time, I then building put it out, we delivered about 350 digital products. So that's through web, mobile, and social. So when I went off and went to the world with this skill. I started working with a company called Lola Tech, who were looking at how they could use new interfaces to build products of their own, and helped that company in 2015 do some horizon scanning to see how people were going to be interfacing with digital products and services, and then buying goods in a 5 to 10 year horizon. The Alexa has recently come out, and we built our first skill before Alexa arrived in the UK, actually, in summer 2016 for a low cost airline to test out if you could book a plane ticket using voice. That was quite good, and so then we then produced a separate business called Dazzle, which is owned by Lola Tech. And the first concept for that was as an in-room concierge. We managed to win a competition with Marriott Hotels. So by Christmas 16, we'd fully deployed that into 10 rooms in Marriott County Hall, and that was very much allowing people within the rooms to request things they would normally request of the concierge. And that works very well. It tested well. What we realized there was that voice alone was not the answer. And so we then built a companion chatbot so that when you were requesting new towels, you then ping on your messenger, your companion messenger bot, that that request had been acknowledged, and you would get your towels in 10 minutes time. That then sold very well through other hotel groups, and we then pivoted. We won another competition with London Midland, which is now an ex-rail company here in the UK, and they were saying that this is the way to approach a whole load of challenges from digital ticketing and user interface and kind of customer experience challenges in the UK rail sector. So Dazzle then evolved, and very much as a platform to allow travel operators to maintain a consistent and immediate conversation with all of their customers, no matter what channel they interface through. So, just to take a step back, if you are a rail customer and you want to know when the next train is from Glasgow to London, you'd want to say, you'd want to be able to ask that through an Alexa, or through a chatbot, or through a website, or through Messenger. And if you're going to build the capability to respond to that automatically, the best practice is to build one platform that delivers that response and have a consistent message, because then over time you can build up a bit of trust and personalization through that, and then sell ancillary services where this commerce piece drops in. And so that was then a project delivered to Lola Tech, and now Say It Now goes and speaks to predominantly e-commerce businesses and explains to them the merits of immediacy and how that can help them increase their customer experience, and then obviously increase the sales. And so that's a potted history of Charlie's things.
Nice. So I think you touched on a few things there then that I think were quite interesting. One was you talking about booking a plane ticket, and then it kind of went in, you kind of went out experience in rail. So it's all kind of very much kind of in hotels. So it's all very much travel kind of based. I'm wondering if this principle might apply to some companies that aren't travel as well. But when you think about booking a train ticket or a plane ticket via voice, where would you start? What would be the first kind of thing to consider? I mean, because there's plenty of companies who are starting to approach this thing now. And maybe we'll back up in a little bit and maybe talk about the high level stuff in terms of why it's important. I think most of the people who are listening to this are probably already convinced about the fact that it's important. So where would somebody start? Where would a brand start if you're thinking about moving transactions into this conversational space?
Yeah, so because we've been thinking about this for quite a while, it's important not to oversell the solution. So where we are with voice specifically is still very, very young. And if you are going to try and replace a face-to-face travel agent, you are going to fail. So you need to work out exactly where you can deliver the most value within that customer journey, and that's often going to start at the discovery phase. So the ways to impress new customers are to try and deliver them an excellent customer service wherever they enter the top of your sales funnel. So for us, it's not necessarily just looking and concentrating as voice as the innovation. The innovation that we've got is natural language processing. And then natural language processing is able to power voice as a channel. But if you're going to take this this view that you should be building an assistant for your brand that's able to take in text queries and then deliver a compelling response, then you shouldn't necessarily just keep that to voice. So you should think about where you can point that elsewhere. And so the channels that you can power immediately are things like Facebook Messenger, Google Assistant, Alexa, web chat, SMS, or even for mobile and Twitter. So that no matter where someone asks a question as that first point of entry to your brand, you're able to respond to them immediately. And all of those different channels have the ability to deliver you some element of insight into that customer, which can then power the CRM. So that when you see them again, if they send a tweet to your travel brand and say, "I'm thinking about going on holiday. I wonder if whoever has any options for me." If they then go home and later speak to their Alexa or Google Home and say, "Look, I'm thinking about traveling with this brand who they've seen, so they've got some affinity with," you're then able to kind of tie those two up, and at each point able to gather a little bit more CRM data, so that if later you're then able to use that conversational channel, which then at the moment these smart speakers they're predominantly going to be used at home. If you could push people onto a chatbot that's kind of Facebook Messenger style engagement, which they can use on the fly when they're on their commute, and then you can ask them there whether they want special offers, then you've opened up a few channels of communication, and over time you can understand which one of those that you can communicate via that will get you a better conversion rate than you do today. So it's to back up in response to your specific question, where should people start? I think start slowly, but wow with your first touch customer experience and deliver that immediately. Because if you don't get an immediate response, if you're trying to talk to a brand, then people are going to go elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So what you're kind of saying is that don't start straight at the conversion. Start further up the sales funnel at the first point of entry, and also don't necessarily navigate or be diverted straight to a specific platform. Try and see if you can cover all of the main kind of entry points. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, there's a lot of research that's coming through which is backing this up around the importance of immediacy, and there's a report that Salesforce it's just a couple of months ago, which said that 64% of consumers and 80% of business buyers said they expect companies to respond and interact with them in real time. Now, that's not saying that they expect them to have excellent voice presence, or this is to respond in real time. So even if it's just to get something back which says, "I've heard you. I'm not sophisticated enough to take you through the entire journey, but but this is the way that you should continue that conversation with me as a brand," then at least you're on that road. And I think that what brands should be very cognizant of is the fact that right now you're going to deliver some kind of a immediacy through your business, and it will be in its infancy. It's like producing a child that you train, but you need to start on that journey so that in the fullness of time you will be able to automate your brand persona, so that you get this kind of Don Draper style brand ambassador, which is able to bring everyone home.
Nice. So you mentioned earlier on, just then CRM. So you talked about having, a kind of central point where the technology sits, and then you essentially offer that service or that conversation into whichever channel it needs to be on, whether that's on mobile or Alexa or Google Home or wherever it is. And then you mentioned CRM. So is that where it all starts, or is that what's pushing stuff out, or is that where everything ends up in terms of managing the customer data?
So that's where you get the understanding about how you're going to increase your conversion rate. So any company which is starting to profile their customers on an individual basis rather than on a kind of cohort or a kind of more generalized persona basis is going in the right direction. So the goal that any kind of marketeer is aspiring to is that you want to be having conversations, your one-to-one conversations. So none of your in and outbound conversations are the same as each other. They're all tailored to the person you're talking to based on who they are and the information you've gathered along the way. And the reason that's important is that in order to increase the propensity of people to buy things, you need to have a trusted conversation, which means that, and this kind of comes back to the earlier point of you don't want to try and promise too sophisticated an assistant or engagement if you can't deliver it. So keep it as simple so that anyone can get to get the information that they want at that stage. And if you're able to deliver that, then they'll start to trust you. And if they trust you, then they'll come back more often. More often they come back at every engagement. You can understand a little bit more about them and the way they are. And the more you understand about people, the more you're able to narrow down the way by which you're engaging with them, so that it is a kind of trusted one-to-one conversation. And like you and I are talking will be very different to the way that you will talk with someone else. But you and I have had a lifetime experience about how to frame our conversation with each other, and we are both going to be more advanced than the assistants we can build today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, talking about going backing up just a little bit, then to we started out with the plane ticket thing and asking where to start, and then you kind of went on to Dazzle and the hotel and kind of rail experience. Obviously, there's been stuff kind of that Amazon have done since then, which is all around kind of helping hotels to have their presence on Alexa, so to speak, with the hospitality feature that they've released. Is there any kind of correlation with those two things? Are they trying to do the same job or not?
Yeah, I haven't quite got to the bottom of this, so I would appreciate some steering if what I'm just about to say isn't true. But the way I've understood it is that very early, just before the launch of, or just after we came up with the concept of Dazzle in the UK on, I think, the 30th of September 2016. It was a sunny afternoon in the Dove and Broadway Market. And I think 2 days before that was the official launch of Alexa in the UK. And what we then did is over the next 18 months, we were very heavily focused on hospitality, and we worked with Marriott to put a proposition together, and it was there was four pieces of the puzzle. There was the Alexa devices in the room and the skill that went with that. There was the companion messenger app, which is our first step towards this omni-channel thinking of the system. There was a screen that went next to the concierge, or as Marriott called it, at your service, and then the system that tied them all together. And we, on our own time and money, in good faith, were as part of the Amazon developer community, tested out that business model. We ended up pivoting towards travel operators, basically because of the unit or economics of those two different business models. But there's a world where we would have carried on with the hotels. And the message that I believe Amazon's giving out by putting the hospitality proposition out to market is that they're very happy for the development community to try out different business models on top of their technology stack using their own time and money, but the ones that have been validated and see them most lucrative, they will go after themselves. And if my assumption there is wrong, then please can someone correct me. But if I'm correct, then that sends out quite a worrying message to the developer community that, if you prove to have come up with an idea or, evaluated the marketplace and then have built a service offering on top of that technology stack, there is a world that one day that will be usurped and swallowed up by the Amazon machine. It's hard to see that that's not a compelling way to think in the same week that Bezos is named the most wealthy man ever.
Yeah, it's a point of view that I think is shared in many areas. We've touched on it with the guys at Mycroft when we had those on the podcast. We had Joshua Montgomery and Derek Schweppe and Steve Penrod, the whole Mycroft team, and their kind of point was that if you are, and this is kind of relevant to the conversation in terms of commerce, if you're a business, at one point in time, you're probably going to end up competing with Amazon because Amazon are kind of everywhere and expanding quite rapidly. So it's interesting that what Mycroft are offering is an alternative to what that problem might be, in that if there is decent functionality being explored and decent use cases being uncovered, then there's absolutely nothing stopping Amazon from doing stuff like that and bringing things into the actual core platform itself. So it's an interesting concept, isn't it? I just wanted to mention it because I know you'd put a lot of effort into the hotel side of things. So if anyone at Amazon is and can comment on it, then it would be really good for them to reach out about that, because I think that...
I'd be happy to be set right if that's not the case. But that's how it feels and looks from the communications and as far deep as I could read.
So on that, then, maybe that is the case, maybe it's not the case, who knows? But if you're a brand and you are a brand that has stuff to sell, as in, well, maybe this is one of the questions actually, is the where does the conversational commerce start and end? Are we talking just physical products? Are we talking digital products such as, I don't know, software and music? And so there's a twofold question. The first one is, where does the conversational commerce stuff start? As in, what can you purchase via a conversation at the moment? And then we'll move on after that maybe to what kind of brands and what kind of industries perhaps can be thinking about moving into a conversational commerce space. But first of all, what is the lay of the land, so to speak, and the types of industries where transactions are possible and the types of things that you can buy?
Yeah, fair enough. So this is anyone who sells either physical or digital goods using digital channels. And because you're right, any kind of e-commerce is where we're really concentrating, because there's more stat. Is 57% of customers have stopped buying from a company because a competitor provided a better experience. So the first off is, how do you deliver immediacy, which is a quick win for customer experience, because people tend to have a shorter and shorter attention span, and if you don't catch them in the moment, there's a chance you will lose that sale to a competitor. So if someone is thinking about buying something, whatever channel that you've got open to them, we're not an SEO business, although one of the services that we offer is conversational SEO. So how do you make sure that your natural listings through Alexa and Google Assistant can bubble up? But moreover, if you've got a specific skill or offering that gives you a better chance to engage at that particular moment. So you either want to capture that interest, and that's by entering those details of that individual at that point into your CRM, so that you can start a dialogue. So it might be a complicated sales process. Or to just say, okay, you're looking for something. We haven't built a complicated commerce, conversational commerce feature yet. So here's a link to the product page, and you can immediately deep link them, because the benefits of conversation, of voice for any kind of conversation, is that you don't have to learn how to use a website, so you take out the GUI element. So over the last since I've been involved in the web, so over the last 19 years, there has been a huge growth in the understanding and kind of practice of customer experience, moreover, in the digital world, kind of user experience design. And so websites that you go to, you should, if they've been very well designed, you should be able to navigate them well. However, say that's pulling kind of 1 million eyeballs a day, they may be trying to complete 50,000 different tasks. And so there's still if you go to a website that you've never used before, the first thing that your mind has to do is learn how to use that website. Over time, because our $1 billion club, the four big players, Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple, because they are pushing their assistants front and center, over time you will expect to be able to use conversation, whether that's voice or just writing a request into that website to specifically ask your question, and then immediately be taken to where you expect to go to the answer to that question. So that's where you can capture that user and then get them to where they're trying to get to faster.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so are we saying then that essentially almost any brand from any industry that has predominant, does it have to be a digital product, a physical product? What are we talking?
It doesn't matter. So anyone who's got something that they're trying to achieve through a digital channel. So where our focus is e-commerce, because the people want to buy things in the moment, and there's a lot of proof that if you can deliver immediacy on the channels that people are using, people are tending to use messaging channels more and more. So fish where the fish are, make sure you work as well there as you do within your own properties, so your own website and mobile app. Then you can increase that conversion rate. So that's an easy place for us to begin. But we are talking to a number of B2B customers, which tend to be a more involved sale, but the thinking methodology is still the same. You've managed to get somebody to want to think about you and want to engage with you at a moment in time. You need to be able to respond to them at that moment in time, and if you can capture some extra details about them to put in your CRM, so that they are then forever in your grips, assuming you're GDPR compliant, then that's good for you.
And then, so you mentioned previously about having the kind of conversational element, not overselling it, but having some kind of conversational element there. And then if you can't fulfill the actual request in terms of the transaction, then deep linking to a place where they can fulfill the transaction. Presumably you would need to do a lot of work in order to establish or understand what it is that they're trying to buy at that time. So what would be some of the things that might prevent people from turning a general conversation and understanding what people are asking for into a transaction that happens during the conversation? Does that make sense?
No. Can you explain that?
All right.
Again?
So we're talking about the let's say, for example, if it's Facebook Messenger, and we were talking about that if you create some kind of conversational experience, you're not always going to be able to do the actual transaction in the messaging bot potentially. So, but then you mentioned that if you can't do that, don't oversell it and instead deep link to the product itself. So let's say, for example, you are on Facebook Messenger, or it could even be Alexa or something like whatever conversational platform you're on. You ask or inquire about a product. It understands what the product is that you're trying to buy, and then it will send you a link to that product. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of what would happen?
Yeah, exactly. So, you've got to think of everything like it's all going to be a sales funnel. And, the way you navigate through websites is a useful way to think about this. So that if you're on a department store website and you say, I'm looking actually for a pair of shoes, I'm looking for red shoes, I'm looking for red shoes size 6, then that conversation, if we dropped out at red shoes, right, and you started to talk about a colour of red that even I haven't heard of, then it would say, like, we've got this far. I'm afraid I can't take you any further. I can either have someone phone you back in a certain agreed time frame. We can, or you can get link here, because the fallback, people, the brands will have these digital properties and the current way they're servicing their customers, and you can fall back at that point in the sales funnel. But at that point, what you've done is you've already profiled that individual and added to the CRM that they were interested in red shoes at that point. So the next day you can maybe email them or drop them a thing. You can really turn up the customer experience at that point and say, look, you have been using one of the newest forms of communication that we've been working on lately. We saw that you dropped out at this point. Here is a special offer if you complete this. And, that's there's a school of thought that says that if you can respond well to a drop off, that's almost better than being able to deliver something seamlessly, because you show that you're human and you actually care.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think I misunderstood what you said originally there. Then I thought you were meaning that if there's something you can't fulfill, then try and, if you've already identified what it is, try and send them to another place for them to finish a transaction. I didn't realise you were talking about kind of error recovery, which is in a situation where you can't help them, then you fall back on an existing channel. That explains things, yeah.
Yeah, and that you'd have to do some cross-channel work on a voice experience, but usually there's most of these interactions will be happening in a conversational environment. So we can't wait to start to use WeChat. WhatsApp. We're in discussions with a couple of companies about using WeChat, because that works really well both ways. Because WeChat wants to break more into the West, and we want to be doing more in China.
Okay, that sounds interesting. What about customer awareness in all of this kind of thing? So I think people are kind of starting to get to a point where they are beginning to try and transact on, let's say, Alexa, for example. Although I've had a little bit of bother, and I think I can only buy stuff I've already bought, as opposed to finding new stuff is quite difficult. And then I come across a thing on VoiceBot, which was an interesting stat that said that 22% of smart speaker owners have bought something through a smart speaker. So awareness tends to be getting there, so to speak. But are people?
Sounds very high. Does that feel right to you?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, my experience has been that I've tried many times. It's like Siri. I'm persistent with Siri, and I will use Siri constantly because it's the only assistant I've got on my phone. So I will use it and see if it works all the time. So I've got the same kind of thing with Alexa. I'll just try it all the time to see if it's improving. But I don't know, let's just have a look. It says that the survey found that at least 22% of US smart speaker owners have purchased something using the devices. So it's not global, it's US apparently.
Okay. Interesting.
What the sample size was and all that sort of stuff, I don't know. But would you not think that as many people as are aware that you can transact in those channels at the moment?
No, exactly. There's the microphone. So the microwave comparison. When the microwave was launched, people thought it would take over and revolutionise your kitchen. And the kitchens of the future would only have a microwave; they wouldn't have a hob or an oven. And then people found the specific use case of the microwave was for beans and soup, and you'll soon find out baby food. Now, and this, is that going to be the same with smart speakers? Are they just very good for turning your lights and music on and putting timers on in the kitchen, or where do the killer apps lie? Are they going to become more of a main interface? This is all well documented in the hype cycle. I think we're coming to the peak of the voice hype cycle, and this will be the one and only interface. And we won't talk through any other interface, but it will form part of the mix and part of the buying journey. But I as I kind of said at the top, I think that the real innovation here is natural language processing, and the way that you can use conversation to get to where you want to faster through any website, and that being the interface of choice. There's 8.3 trillion SMSs sent a year. Everyone who owns some kind of phone, even those who do not even own a smartphone, know what a conversational interface. Big know what how to have a conversation just using using words, and that's the best interface is no interface, and if we can get to that point, then that's the real innovation, I think.
So for what would then be some of the reasons why brands, and maybe not even brands, it could be hobbyists, it could be anybody who can develop or build stuff on these various conversational platforms, if we're saying that it's very early days and that 22% of American smart speaker owners have bought something, if we don't think that's maybe is realistic, or whether it might be quite low, what would some of the reasons be then for brands to be really seriously considering this as a channel, if it's not quite, if the users don't really know about it, or if those numbers are lower than we suspect?
Yeah, well, it's undeniably an emerging channel, so you can do damage to your brand if you do not participate at all. I think there's still an amazing stat that more than half of retail purchases are still purchased on the high street, right? And so that still hasn't quite hit a tipping point. So, but it would harm a retail brand not to have an online presence, and that's been rising over time. And when the people who got there earlier are able to take more of that market share than those who got there later. So I think that you need to be in it to maintain the positioning of your brand. So that's a real consideration. And then I would advocate again that it isn't just the voice channel you need to look at. It's the work that you need to do to create a really, really compelling voice channel. Sure, you can replicate to allow yourself to communicate across all other channels, and once you've done that, then you can add other channels as they come along, because they will continue to arrive.
What then? It's obviously difficult to say without a crystal ball or a magic wand or anything like that, but you kind of mentioned around the microwave was overhyped potentially, and now it's just this thing that we've got in our kitchen and we just deal with it. If you were kind of like follow this hype cycle of smart speakers and conversational commerce, where do you think that will take us? Do you think it will be the new mobile and something that everyone's going to be transacting on? Do you think it's going to be not quite as much as that? Where do you kind of see it going over the next kind of 3 year, 5 year?
Well, do you sort of give a talk at the Voice Summit recently? So I get most of my my view of the future from science fiction, and that all started in 1988 with Kit, right? So look at the way that Michael Knight spoke to the Knight Industries 2000, which was his voice-enabled smart car. He had a consistent experience, whether he was on he even had a smartwatch, so he could speak to Kit using a smartwatch. He could speak to Kit in the car, and I'm sure that if he was in the Knight Industries jet, he'd still be able to speak to Kit. So he saw Kit as his ethereal helper who was independent of channel, but maintained an understanding of the conversations that he'd had before, and to choose your ethereal assistant of choice. But this is where I think this is going, is that you will have all of these channels available to you. I don't think it's going to be easy to get rid of email, but you've got your email channel. You have web and mobile delivering you screens. You will have the rise of other screens. Your microwave will have a screen, and your fridge will have a screen, and they'll all have some kind of assistant embedded within them. And you'll expect to start to talk to them all interchangeably to do different things, but they'll all play a part in a purchasing cycle, which is why I come right back to this whole idea of emerging commerce. The way that humans transact has always evolved and will continue to change, and it's important to keep an eye on how that's happening. And that's why you should, continue to think about the rise of these instant channels, or and how then you can drive immediacy, so that no matter where people start to talk to your brand, that's another opportunity to delight them.
And then what if, maybe I'll try and see if I can get some Knight Rider music to put behind that a little bit there. That might be quite cool.
Please, that'd be great.
What kind of resources are required to, I mean, what you kind of explained there sounds very much as though, it's all of this assistant stuff isn't going to be dramatically overhyped. It'll just end up being something that is with us, like our phone, that we call upon when needed. It knows what we've done. It knows what we're probably likely to want to do. And it's kind of almost like an ever-present thing. So that sounds like it would be fairly easy to get used to that. That would be simple, I think, a simple concept for that to become the norm for users, for end users, to be able to talk to the watch, talk to the phone, talk to the smart speaker, and have it all connected kind of together. Makes perfect sense. From the brand's perspective, from the company's perspective, who are looking at implementing this, obviously you're going to have a lot of development and discovery and work to be done up front to get all of this stuff up and running. What about after that? What kind of resources and kind of either kind of skill sets or practices do you need to be able to maintain something like this? Is it you hand it over and it looks after itself, or do you actually need a team of people to be managing and maintaining something like this?
Yeah, so we're building a platform to support this kind of service delivery. So we would advocate that model is that you speak to experts who can amalgamate their wisdom. But the kind of resources you need are people who are going to be very, very good at machine learning and taking in the exceptions to make sure that your system keeps getting better and moves from your infant to your Don Draper. You then need to talk to the brand evangelists within your business, and because what you are producing here is going to end up being the voice of your business, or the conversation that people have with your business, and that needs to be core to the values of the business. It needs to be able to position you in the right way, and needs to be able to error handle to reflect the way that you want to deliver the experience of your business. Because we're in a world where all brands are leveled, because they might all be going through a voice like Alexa or like a Google Assistant voice, and there's a real danger that's where it'll end up, and the access points, or the voice access point, starts to sound like one of these big four players. You have the opportunity to differentiate yourself using experience, and so that you can, I said earlier that 57% of customers have stopped buying for a company because a competitor provided a better experience, and as that becomes more and more important to customers, that's a better and better way for brands to differentiate themselves from each other.
So you mentioned the big four players there. So we're talking Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Amazon, each of which has kind of like the top four sort of assistants. Which of those at present can you actually transact on? Which can you kind of buy something on at the moment? Do you know or not?
So obviously Amazon, Google are increasingly putting you're able to integrate things within the assistant on your phone. Using Google Pay, so you can definitely buy software using the assistant. Apple, I don't know whether you can buy. You can purchase through Siri.
Seems very locked down from what I've heard. Siri,
but they're really good at in Apple kind of in environment purchases, and you can't specifically purchase through the Microsoft platform yet.
Okay, so and I know we're not talking, you're kind of recommending not to focus specifically on voice as such, but certainly these four are offering the kind of like biggest assistance, and I think probably Facebook can be thrown in there as well with Facebook Messenger potentially. Are there any either risks or what? You're trying to put me off there.
I'm sorry, no.
Are there any risks or kind of like I'm losing it. So these big four players, right? Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Siri, and then if you want to put Facebook in there as well. You kind of, if you want to be transacting in that environment, you kind of need to play by their rules and essentially trade on their turf, don't you? Is there any drawbacks to that?
So they give you a huge amount of kind of distribution. So when we were building mobile apps, so Sandra, who's our VP of product, who's VP of product over at Dazzle, and actually VP of product at Say It Now, his background is in Nectar. So he was the global VP of product for Amia, who was the company behind Nectar, and then he's worked through Microsoft and Party Games. He's all about enterprise grade kind of transactional software, and he's got a big kind of, mobile background. The best practice there is, if you're going to get any advantage through these large platforms, then they do normally take about 30%. But if you're going to find a distributor to sell you on the high street, they take 30 or 40% as well. So there's an argument that in order to get that reach, it's worth paying that away. But what we're looking at doing is to see whether there's a way that we can use these platforms to increase this kind of trusted, personalized conversation, and then take that into an existing kind of owned media world, where you can then complete that transaction. So optimizing a kind of website for conversational commerce, and then using their own environment there.
Okay, that sounds good. And then, in terms of the team that you would need to create this stuff, obviously people would be more than welcome to give Say It Now a shout. But in terms of the skill sets that you would need to kind of create this sort of stuff, what sort of skills are you needing to? Is it the same sort of skills that you would need to create, either an Alexa skill or a chatbot, or do you need different skills for adding in the kind of the commerce kind of side of things?
No. I mean, you want kind of enterprise architects who can create a solid platform for you to integrate all of these different channels to build the central assistant. What we found over the last couple of years to work really well is hiring poets and screenwriters, so you can then get a bouncy conversation. You brief them in like you would do if they were doing some ghostwriting, and say, right, this is the personality of our brand that we're trying to get across. And so when you're then kind of building up the training sets and the training data, you brief them, make sure that the way that the answers are coming out are all in the right kind of tonality, so that best represents your brand.
Yeah, fantastic, wicked. Conscious that we're running out of time. Have you any final thoughts, Charlie? Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think would be useful for the listeners to kind of take note of?
No, I mean the points that I was trying to get across are that the way that people buy things is going to continually change. So don't think that you can get away with a model now that's going to work forever. You need to continually reevaluate the use of different channels. And that leads on to the point that there are different channels involved, and the way that you're going to differentiate yourself as a brand is by delivering excellent or kind of noteworthy customer experience at every channel. And I fundamentally believe that basically that is through immediacy right now that's going to differentiate you. If I try to talk to your brand using any channel, and let's just use kind of Facebook Messenger, Assistant, Alexa, web, SMS, or Twitter. If I try and speak to your brand today using those channels, am I going to get an immediate response? And do you think that it would set you apart from the rest if you could deliver that?
Fantastic. Wicked. Thank you, Charlie. Where can people reach out to you, and where could brands contact if they were looking for a little bit of help in this area?
Sure, thank you. SayIt'sNow.ai, and I am at Charles Cadbury on Twitter.
Fantastic. Wicked. Charles, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. This has been fun.
That was Charlie Cadbury. Thank you, Charlie, for that conversation. That was an immense conversation. Loved what Charlie was saying around the importance of brands to be able to provide an immediate response to customer queries and questions in a conversational manner. This is really the time for brands to start thinking about getting involved and getting a presence on these conversational platforms. Whether the digital assistant concept is going to be the next mobile, as it's professed to be, or whether it's going to be something that's going to arrive slowly but surely and just be bubbling under the surface constantly on your watch and on your mobile and on your smart speakers or whatever. How it's going to end up, who knows? But one thing is absolutely certain: more and more people are going to be transacting and doing more and more on their digital assistants. Whether those voice bot stats are 100% accurate, whether they're a little bit high, who knows? But certainly the trend is that people are getting more comfortable speaking to these assistants. And if now is not the time, then when is? I love Charlie's analogy of starting off building a baby, which is pertinent because we're expecting a baby any moment now. In fact, he might even be here by the time this podcast goes out. Building a baby and then nurturing it and growing it and, developing it into something that's more complex, able to handle more conversations, able to handle more transactions, and able to meet your business goals a lot better. So thank you, Charlie, for joining us. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, see you later.